Okay, welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're diving into the world of Malaysian politics, specifically a really insightful conversation with Khairy Jamaluddin.
That's right.
We're pulling all our key insights directly from, a recent pretty extensive interview he gave.
Yeah, we've gone through it, and it offers a genuinely unique look into his journey, not just the public one, but his personal philosophy on politics, leadership, his perspective on critical areas for reform here in Malaysia,
hmm
and the powerful lessons he's taken away from facing crises and, well, navigating significant personal and political reinvention.
And our mission in this deep dive, tailored specifically for you, is to kind of cut through all the detail and zero in on the most important nuggets, the key insights from this source material.
Think of it as getting the essence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The standout ideas so you can quickly grasp what's most significant from this conversation. Let's get into it.
Absolutely. And we're going to follow his story, starting right at the beginning, his early life. One point that really jumped out from the source is just how unique his upbringing was.
Yeah.
He was born in Kuwait, spent much of his childhood overseas because his father was in the Malaysian Foreign Service. He actually never attended a Malaysian school.
That's such a crucial piece of context, isn't it?
Yeah,
Growing up in different cultures, exposed to global dynamics so young, you can see how that might shape a perspective.
totally.
The source highlights that his interest in politics sparked early, precisely because he saw his father's diplomatic work as being, I think the phrase was, adjacent to politics and government.
And here's a detail that really brings that to life. He shares the specific, memorable anecdote, a conversation with his father in Japan back in the mid-'80s.
Okay.
He was quite young, maybe 7 or 8, and his father explained the significance of the Reagan-Gorbachev summit, talking about huge concepts like nuclear proliferation, geopolitical rivalry, even human rights.
Wow, at 7 or 8.
Yeah. He says that simple conversation just opened up a world of ideas for him.
That's powerful, connecting that abstract, high-stakes world of international relations to a child's understanding and sparking that curiosity.
Hmm.
It wasn't just his father's influence, though. The source also notes his mother's significant role, her deep involvement in voluntary work, civil society, being a founding member of Petiwi.
Right, that clearly instilled an element of service in him from a young age.
So you've got this blend of international exposure and a foundation in public service. It seems like the perfect setup for his academic path, studying philosophy, politics, and economics, PPE, at university.
Yeah, the source makes it clear this drew him even deeper into the world of politics.
So if we look at all that, the global upbringing, that early spark, the academic focus, what does the source identify as his core motivation for being in politics? It's not just service, is it?
No, it goes deeper. According to the interview, politics for him is fundamentally about organizing society in a way that is fair. That word fair is key. It's not just about managing things, it's about structuring society with a specific equitable purpose.
That definition, organizing society fairly, provides a really strong foundation.
Yeah.
Now, moving from that core purpose to the practical realities of being a politician,
Hmm.
the source addresses what seems like an inherent tension. The need to genuinely serve the people, what he calls the true north, versus the undeniable reality that to actually do that, you need to gain popularity, win votes.
This raises a vital point about political effectiveness, doesn't it? The source argues these aren't mutually exclusive. You have to be able to bring people with you.
Right.
If you can't win support, you can't implement your ideas for organizing society fairly, no matter how good they are.
And he brings in a really striking definition of leadership he learned at Harvard Kennedy School that speaks directly to this tension,
Oh, yeah. What was that?
being able to disappoint people at the rate they can accept.
Wow. That's a surprisingly candid way to put it, but it's incredibly insightful, actually.
Isn't it?
Politics inherently involves making difficult decisions with finite resources. You simply cannot satisfy everyone all the time.
Impossible.
So effective leadership, as the source describes it, is about managing that inevitable disappointment at a pace the public can tolerate. If you push too hard, too fast, you lose your mandate.
And then you can't do anything.
Exactly. Then you can't make any decisions, good or bad. It highlights the absolute necessity of maintaining that public support while still having the courage to make tough calls.
And speaking of difficult decisions, the source connects this idea directly to the necessity for structural reforms in Malaysia. He points to past examples like Dr. Najib's decisions.
Right, the GST, rationalizing subsidies.
Controversial, but he frames them as necessary, difficult steps taken to improve the country's fiscal health.
Precisely. Those were politically costly choices aimed at long-term economic stability. And Khairy Jamaluddin shared that he actually met with Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim early in his term to offer his ideas for the structural economic reforms needed now.
Okay, so based on his experience and analysis shared in the interview, what are the 3 big reforms he identifies as absolutely essential for any Malaysian government to tackle?
Okay, first he points to tax reform. Malaysia's tax base, he says, is just too small compared to its peers.
Right.
He believes a broad consumption tax like GST or a value-added tax, a VAT, is the most efficient way to expand it. Now, while the current government has expanded the sales and service tax, the SST, he notes this is a less efficient approach compared to GST or VAT.
So the direction is right, trying to expand the tax base, but maybe the method chosen isn't the most effective, according to him.
That's his assessment, yeah. The second key reform is subsidy rationalization.
The big one.
Yeah. Subsidies, particularly the fuel subsidy for RON 95 petrol, are highlighted as the biggest cost, the elephant in the middle of the room, as he put it.
Yeah.
They're seen as regressive, not productive for the economy. While some rationalization has started, especially with diesel and partially for RON 95, the most significant expenditure remains.
Addressing fuel subsidies is clearly a tough one politically, but necessary. And the third major reform.
Pension reform. The cost of civil service pensions is rising significantly. It's projected to exceed RM 30 billion in the next 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, due to people living longer and, a growing number of retirees on a defined benefit system. The proposed solution, and one many countries have adopted, is to move new civil service hires onto an EPF retirement fund scheme.
Okay.
He acknowledges this is difficult for the new generation entering service, but states the current system is simply unsustainable in the long run.
Those are 3 massive areas, each with huge political implications. Based on progress in these 3 specific areas, how does he rate the current government?
Well, based purely on these 3 structural reforms he mentioned, he gives them a rating of 1.5 out of 3.
So 50% done.
Pretty much.
Done.
Tax reform isn't done efficiently in his view. Subsidy rationalization is only partially completed, and pension reform hasn't really been touched yet.
And the consequence of not doing these politically difficult reforms, what's the risk?
Without undertaking these structural changes, the source emphasizes that Malaysia simply won't have sufficient funds for crucial public services down the line, like healthcare, education, public transport.
Right.
It all circles back to that fundamental challenge: finite resources requiring difficult strategic choices.
Let's switch gears slightly. There's often this perception, isn't there, of a divide between politicians and technocrats. The idea that one's focused on winning votes, the other on policy detail.
The interview offers his perspective on this. He sees himself as a politician, yes, but one who genuinely finds satisfaction in the work itself, the policy. He's interested in that process of organizing society fairly, not just the mechanics of winning elections.
And his key principle underpinning this approach seems to be that you absolutely have to master your brief.
Absolutely essential, according to the source. And he offers a critique of the current system for ministers' onboarding.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. When ministers are appointed, they're often immediately put in front of the press, asked for their priorities without adequate briefing. They have to, as he puts it, fake it till you make it, which he sees as a significant problem.
That's a vivid image, like being handed the keys to a Ferrari on day 1 and expected to drive it perfectly without any training.
Exactly. He proposes a practical solution. Ministers should be given a dedicated, say, 2-3 weeks for proper onboarding.
Yeah.
Time to get fully briefed, understand their ministry's complexities, meet stakeholders, and figure out what's realistically achievable.
He even shared a personal action he took when he was appointed health minister that illustrates this. He wasn't a doctor, right, or a healthcare specialist.
Right.
So he proactively engaged a consulting firm for virtual onboarding sessions on crucial topics like healthcare financing, public health. He recognized he needed to understand the portfolio deeply to be effective.
That initiative really highlights the importance he places on functional competence, doesn't it? Regardless of one's background, you have to understand the details, master the brief.
And one period where his ability to master the brief and lead was put to an extreme test was, of course, during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, absolutely.
Malaysia's performance during that crisis, particularly under his leadership as health minister and the coordinating minister for the vaccination program, was actually quite notable internationally.
It certainly was. The source mentions the Global COVID Index developed by Idris Jala's team, approved by the WHO, which consistently ranked Malaysia in the top 10 globally for its handling of the pandemic during his tenure.
That kind of ranking isn't arbitrary. It reflects, effective crisis management and execution.
Definitely. He identifies his leadership style during that period as that of a wartime general.
Right.
Aggressive, focused on breaking down silos, acting quickly, contrasting it with a peacetime leader who might prioritize consensus and diplomacy. He admitted he thrives in that campaign-like environment.
He gave some concrete examples of this crisis leadership style, too, setting up a bunker office away from the more formal, protocol-heavy government buildings.
Yeah, that allowed his core team to work together constantly. He made sure his own room was the same size as everyone else's to show he was in the trenches with the team.
Facilitated quicker decision-making, presumably.
That was the idea. And his focus was intensely on execution. He had a clear mantra. Vaccines don't save lives, vaccinations do.
Powerful distinction.
The singular goal was getting jabs into people's arms, reaching an incredible peak of 500,000 vaccinations a day at the program's height.
500,000 a day. That's staggering.
He stressed that the ultimate true north during that period wasn't just the high number of jabs, but achieving a tangible outcome, safely reopening the country and winning back normalcy.
Which they did.
He notes this was achieved on April 1st, 2022.
I was actually at one of those vaccination centers with my cousin who has autism, and the staff were incredibly patient, really helpful in making sure he was comfortable. Seeing you there on the ground, personally interacting, helping families, it really made the scale and human element of that effort feel very real.
That personal connection during a massive undertaking is powerful. And the source reveals that managing the severe mental and physical strain of that period wasn't just about strategy. He found a surprising method for managing the pressure.
Oh, yeah.
He made the abstract pressure of national responsibility personal by randomly selecting and replying to hundreds of individual emails from citizens daily.
Really? Hundreds?
Hundreds. He found it therapeutic, connecting with the people behind the numbers.
That's a really striking image, leading this massive national effort, yet finding solace in connecting with individuals one by one. Moving from that intense period of crisis leadership, the source touches on his subsequent period of reinvention after the 2022 election. Losing his ministerial post, his parliamentary seat, and being sacked from his party. That must have been incredibly difficult. He described it as being left with nothing.
It was clearly a moment of profound disruption and loss, but the interview shares that the inspiration for his next step came unexpectedly. He was out running, processing everything, and happened to be listening to The Rest is Politics podcast, hosted by two former British politicians who had also been, expelled from their parties.
So that spurred the idea for his own podcast, quite frankly.
Exactly. Which has now become a successful business, employing people, working with brands. It demonstrates a significant and very public reinvention outside the traditional political structure he'd been part of for so long.
He shared a guiding philosophy that helped him navigate this challenging time. Adversity, a privilege. It's a quote he attributes to a UFC fighter.
Embrace the discomfort.
It's about embracing the discomfort, yeah. Seeing challenges as opportunities.
Which he links directly to a personal habit he took up in his late 30s distance running.
Right, I remember reading that.
He started it specifically to get comfortable with discomfort, a mindset he sees as directly relevant to navigating the challenging and unpredictable trajectory of his career.
His engagement with public discourse has clearly shifted, and the rise of podcasts has been central to that. He notes in the interview that they are unfiltered, not time-constrained.
Allows for a level of candor rarely seen in traditional media.
Definitely.
He makes a really insightful point about why podcasts are resonating in public discourse. He calls it the revenge of the long form against a soundbite.
I like that. Revenge of the long form.
Yeah. People, he argues, are actually willing to invest time in detailed, nuanced conversations, pushing back against the dominance of short, reductive sound bites.
He provides examples like Donald Trump appearing on Joe Rogan's podcast, or a Singapore minister using a podcast before an election.
Illustrating how politicians are leveraging this medium for more substantive engagement. Though he adds a caution. Even podcast content, despite its depth, can still be picked up by news outlets and reduced back down to sound bites.
Right. Potentially losing the nuance and context of the longer discussion.
Exactly. So while they allow for depth of views, broaden horizons act like a buffet of knowledge, as he put it.
There is still the risk of being filtered through that traditional media lens.
Transitioning from his personal journey and the media landscape, the source also touches on lessons drawn from the U.S. political landscape, specifically regarding Donald Trump.
Okay, interesting, Chef.
The interview brings in Idris Jalla's perspective, which is that Trump appears to be in denial about a fundamental shift, the decline of the U.S. from a unipolar power to a multipolar world.
With the rise of China, India, BRICS, the EU.
Exactly. Khairy Jamaluddin acknowledges this broader geopolitical shift, stating that Pax Americana, the period of U.S. dominance, is likely a short blip in history. While the U.S. remains remarkably innovative and entrepreneurial, its relative decline is probable, although the speed and extent are uncertain. He raises the question of whether some of Trump's actions, like tariffs, are calculated strategic bluffs or potential miscalculations in this changing global order.
But beyond the geopolitics, the source explores why Trump resonates so powerfully with a significant portion of the U.S. population. What's the take there?
This points to what the source identifies as a critical issue, the failure of elites. The argument is that the Democratic Party, in particular, lost touch with its traditional blue-collar base, becoming perceived as focusing on issues irrelevant to their daily struggles. This led to a fundamental question from those voters: what is in it for us?
So a significant lesson here, for anywhere really, is how elite disconnect from the struggles of ordinary people can lead to unexpected, sometimes dramatic election outcomes.
Absolutely. And the source draws a direct lesson for Malaysia from this. Political elites must constantly ensure they maintain a genuine connection with the man or woman on the street. The interview uses the rise of Nigel Farage's Reform Party in the UK as another example, arguing that traditional party bases in both the Tory and Labour parties no longer feel their parties represent them.
It reinforces that point earlier about needing to bring people with you,
Yeah.
and that politics is fundamentally touch and feel, not just intellectual arguments.
Exactly. It's about resonating on a personal level. He used that analogy of Farage's appeal being like someone you'd want to have a pint with.
It's about perceived authenticity and connection, which can sometimes trump complex policy arguments.
Definitely seems to be part of the equation.
Looking ahead, the source also delves into what his priorities might be if he were ever in a position to lead the government, perhaps as prime minister, while noting that some potential ideas must, of course, remain confidential.
Sure, standard practice. But he outlined 3 major big bucket ministerial areas he would prioritize. First, education. Emphasizing the need to fundamentally reimagine the K-12 model primary and secondary education to prepare students for the future. Crucially, this includes training people for continuous reinvention throughout their careers.
Which is so necessary now with AI and automation.
Exactly. Preparing the workforce for a future where skills need constant updating, people will likely have multiple career pivots.
Makes sense. What's the second bucket?
Second, health. This involves tackling what he calls the twin ticking time bombs.
Which are?
An aging population that is living longer but often in ill health, and the high burden of non-communicable diseases, NCDs, think diabetes, hypertension.
Right.
The focus would be on sustainable health financing and shifting towards cheaper preventative care to keep people healthy longer.
Addressing the health crisis before it completely overwhelms the system.
That's the idea. And third, infrastructure. This means tackling chronic underinvestment in key areas. He cited the logistics and transport network as an example, highlighting the significant multiplier effect development expenditure in these areas can have on the economy.
So, big policy areas requiring structural attention. What about changes to the style of governance itself? Any thoughts shared on that?
Yes. He proposes that ministers and the prime minister need to be much more engaged at the delivery level, really understanding the implementation challenges on the ground.
Getting out of the office more.
Essentially, yes. He suggests reorganizing the Prime Minister's office with key supporting units. Policy, communications, delivery designed to work closely with civil servants to ensure things get done, and strategy, focused on looking ahead.
That structure seems designed to ensure both current execution and future foresight are prioritized. Makes sense.
Yes. A challenge he identifies with implementing such changes is getting the civil service on board with new structures and mindsets.
Yeah, that's always the hurdle, isn't it?
He stresses the need to work with the existing system, which he refers to as the leviathan of government, the large, complex, and sometimes slow-moving machinery.
And for fostering the right culture and mindset within that large system, how do you shift that?
Leadership by example is a key catalyst, he believes. He suggests that on day one, he would emphasize reducing protocol.
Oh, interesting. Why?
To create an environment where the best ideas can surface freely from anywhere in the system without fear of censure or, hierarchical barriers getting in the way.
There's a piece of advice he received early in his ministerial career from Chief Secretary Ali Hamza that seems particularly relevant here.
Yes, he recounts Ali Hamza advising him that the test of a good leader is to be able to work with what you have.
Hmm.
This means focusing on getting the most out of the existing system and personnel rather than constantly trying to replace people. It's about leading within the constraints of reality.
And investing in the next generation of leaders within that system. Did he touch on that?
He expresses a strong belief in promoting people based on merit and capability, regardless of age. He cites his own experience being appointed minister in his 30s,
Right.
and notes that promoting younger talent to senior roles is actually a tradition that exists in Malaysian history, perhaps one that needs reviving.
Shifting gears one last time, the source touches on leadership outside of government leadership at home.
Mm-hmm.
He sees this as requiring a fundamentally different, more personal skill set, emphasizing patience, empathy,
Mm-hmm.
compared to leading in the public or business spheres.
He states very clearly that his most important job is being a father.
Mm-hmm.
He maintains a strict boundary to keep his family, especially his children, out of the public eye so they can have as normal an upbringing as possible. He shares that while his sons would prefer, he doesn't return to politics.
Understandable.
He seeks their understanding for his own aspirations and, sense of purpose.
Connecting the personal and the abstract again. He returns to the COVID experience, highlighting how the pressure of making abstract decisions on a national scale became intensely personal.
Right, and as we touched on earlier, how replying to those individual emails helped him manage that immense pressure by connecting with the human impact.
Yeah.
This leads to a broader point he makes about supporting those in need. He argues that the true measure of a civilization's progress is how it treats people at the margins, individuals with disabilities or unique challenges.
Mm.
He acknowledges Malaysia has made progress but needs significantly more focus in this area.
He shared some powerful, concrete examples of inclusive design from his time as health minister, didn't he?
He did. The COVID vaccination centers, for instance, were intentionally designed from day one to be inclusive for neurodiverse individuals,
How so?
incorporating features like calming rooms, trained staff, sometimes even drive-through options, building accessibility in rather than adding it later as an afterthought. He notes Singapore later adopted similar approaches.
That's a truly impactful detail, making inclusivity a core part of the initial design.
It is. He also mentions his involvement in helping start the We Rock the Spectrum Kids Gym franchise,
Oh, yeah.
which provides a space where all children can play together and parents don't feel the constant need to apologize for their child's behavior, helping normalize inclusion in a community setting.
And a policy idea he feels strongly needs reviving.
Establishing a national autism council, he believes tackling this requires a concerted whole-of-government and whole-of-society approach. Suggests it's an area that needs renewed focus.
This has been a deep dive packed with insights, really drawing out the core ideas from this interview. We've gone from his formative years and his fundamental definition of politics
to the hard realities of necessary structural reforms, the lessons learned from leading during a crisis.
the evolving landscape and power of public conversation, reflections on global politics.
And the critical importance of both connecting with the people you aim to serve and building a truly inclusive society.
It gives you, the listener, a much clearer, more nuanced understanding of his perspective on leadership, policy challenges facing Malaysia, and the path of personal and political evolution, all based directly on the points raised in the source material.
Definitely covers a lot of ground.
Exactly. And if we boil it all down, one of the final thoughts he shared was how he wishes to be remembered, simply as being helpful.
Helpful. Interesting.
If you connect that desire to be helpful with his core motivation of organizing society fairly and his focus on supporting those at the margins, it leaves us with a powerful question for you, the listener, to consider. How can you, in your own life and within your own sphere of influence, embody that quality of being helpful to others and contribute in your own way to building a more fair and inclusive society?
A compelling thought to reflect on.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.